And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with Scoop Duck on 3, coming to you from Eugene, Oregon. It is Wednesday, April 24th. I am so stoked to be back in the beautiful state of Oregon. We got some Oregon recruiting to talk about as the Ducks prepare for a big spring game weekend in Eugene. And we're going to talk about some spring game questions and maybe a little bit of NFL draft talk as well. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast, as you guys know, is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are today, but head on over to Ranchito Grill in Springfield, 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. They got homemade tortillas, great food, great environment, and they will take care of you. And they're doing a meetup after the spring game on Saturday with other Duck fans. So you should head over to Ranchito, especially on Saturday. Head on over there and tell Ruben that Max Torres sent you. Well, I'm not rolling solo once again. I'm joined by my guy, my partner in crime now, if you will, when it comes to all things Oregon recruiting, Justin Hopkins, the publisher and owner of Scoop Duck. How's it going, man?
Great, buddy. I'm doing great, and it looks like you're doing great, enjoying your time in Eugene.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it. Went for a run yesterday and got to go over the footbridge, so definitely feels like I'm back home, if you will. So I couldn't be happier to be back.
No, it's good. It's good to get back, and it's nice for you to, spend some time, around the coaches and the players and stuff at practices. It's always great camaraderie as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And it's going to be a fun weekend for the Ducks with a lot of big time talent coming in. And it kind of feels, Justin, like it was for a while, right? That Oregon things were really slow when it came to recruiting. You had the Matthew Johnson commitment and then like nothing. And then Cooper Perry, Isaiah Mosey. So things are getting going a little bit. And it feels like Oregon's building toward maybe a run here in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it, and I totally understand. You're watching some other schools land commitments, and I know USC went on a run, and Ohio State's been a top team, and those are two teams that Oregon fans pay attention to. And I think this year more than any other year, and I know we talked about this last time, it's going to be quality over quantity, and I think with that, a byproduct is you're going to be recruiting guys that are making decisions later in the cycle. Okay, these 5 stars, these high 4 stars, they're not really making commitments in April. These guys don't have to. So I think it'll be a little different. I know we got a little bit of a push with Perry and Mosey, like you pointed out, but I'm not really. I want to set this up properly. I think people circle the spring game and expect a big quack-a-lanche of commits after. And I'm not sure there will be a ton. There could be some, but I just don't think that we'll see this class, half full by the end of April or mid-May, if you will.
And even I'm glad that you said that, because it's not like you even have to get 3-4 commitments for the spring game to be a success. Lanning was talking about it yesterday after practice. Just, he wants people to see when they come to the spring game. He wants the recruits to see how much football means to Eugene and to the state. So like, this is the day to showcase your program. And since they're having a later game than a lot of other schools, I think it probably gave them a little bit of an edge as far as getting some of these guys on campus. You're not competing with as many schools, right, for that same weekend. So I think it'll still be a big weekend, and you're going to get some commits that are coming back as well. And they are kind of your best peer recruiters, if you will. But it's going to be a big day for Oregon when it comes to just the caliber of guys that they get on campus. As we all know, it's a spring game and Saturday Night Live. Those are the 2 days you really got to circle on your calendar. We're going to get into some guys that are expected on campus in a little bit, Justin. But one of the big developments on the recruiting trail, or in the portal, if you will, came on Tuesday as former Michigan State defensive lineman Derek Harmon is back in the transfer portal. What a crazy development. I remember he was interested in Oregon the first time. I think the Ducks got him out for a visit, and then he put together a whole edit in the video saying, "I'm back at Michigan State," but then here we are again. I don't know what happened, but he's looking for a new home once again, and I think Oregon's going to get involved.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think Oregon will get involved, or is more than likely already involved. I would imagine that was one of the first phone calls that Harmon made, because it felt like, Oregon and Ohio State, and I think at the time maybe Texas was in there, but Texas has landed some other, transfer portal guys since. They can't take them all. And so I think you're kind of looking at those two schools immediately. I think Oregon is really one you have to circle. Doesn't mean they'll get him. I don't know if he will take more visits. You don't have to visit Oregon, because you just did that like a month or two ago whenever he was out here. But yeah, I mean, this transfer portal thing is getting weird, man. I mean, first, like this one, Harmon, you know, jumping in the portal, sticking with Michigan State, back in. Kyle Ford, was at USC, wide receiver, went to UCLA. He's back at USC just a year later. Caden Proctor did basically the same thing as Harmon, except he actually went to Iowa and is back at Bama already. So I don't know. This stuff's getting weird, but if you're Oregon, I guess the point here is Harmon, to me right now, is the one guy that makes this team better. He fits a need, and he is a high caliber player for that need. So I think you'll see Oregon make a very strong push here for Harmon.
Believe some of the other schools that you saw involved with Harmon the first time around, Justin, were Ohio State and Auburn. I think Auburn would be one that's noteworthy because they've been going on a little run along the defensive line in the transfer portal, landing a couple guys recently. I think this week, Isaiah Rakes, the former USC defensive lineman, he committed to Auburn, and Philip Bliddy from Indiana, who I reported last week that Oregon was kind of keeping an eye on in the transfer portal. But Harmon really does feel like he's a guy that fits the need and fits the billing. And I think one key reason for that, Justin, is because he has multiple years remaining, if I'm not mistaken. He's a redshirt junior. So I think that if you're looking at this from Oregon's perspective, obviously Harmon's already a proven guy, but he's not somebody. I think it has to be kind of a special player for you to be like, okay, you're missing all of spring ball, but you can still come in and have an impact this year. And I think that the D line on the interior is definitely where Oregon would probably like a little bit more assurance. But that said, I think they're still confident with the group that they have because they've been bringing in some monsters.
Yeah, they would be okay without him. They'd be phenomenal with him. I think that's the way to look at it. This is not one that they must get or they're in deep trouble. I think this is really just one that they could get, and it would make them better. And it would be a piece that could play right away. It would be a piece that you put in the rotation. And I also think it's a piece that doesn't scare off any of your other guys that are currently in, because that's what Dan Lanning's really juggling right now. You don't want to go hit the transfer portal and bring in two guys and have them chase off 4 or 5 of your guys on your roster. That doesn't help you. So I think you can get away with bringing in a Harmon. I know that the initial question with that has been, what about Jamari Caldwell, who they also brought in from Houston as a defensive lineman? And I think these are not the same player. They wouldn't play the same way. They wouldn't play the same role. And frankly, a guy like Harmon would make Caldwell better and would make Jordan Birch better. He's going to make that defensive line better and those guys around him better. So I think you would see that those upper end guys would welcome it. And I do think that, again, Harmon fills a completely different role than those guys that I just mentioned.
So keep an eye if you're a Duck fan that likes to follow recruiting. I imagine you are if you're watching this video with Justin and myself on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel. Reminder to like and subscribe. We just hit 700 here on the channel, so appreciate your guys' support. And we're only going up because Oregon recruiting isn't slowing down, which means we can't slow down. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Another big name that we talked about a little bit ago, Justin, we thought he was going to be getting on campus, but you know how things go with these visits, last minute flight changes. Other schools try to recruit you to not go visit. Anything can happen. But this one big guy, he was supposed to come last weekend, but didn't make it out. Let's talk about Blake Woodby a second time real quick, because the Ohio State cornerback commit out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland, told me yesterday that he's going to be making it out to Oregon's spring game. And that's a huge visit because, one, Oregon doesn't have any corners or DBs in the fold just yet. And two, because he is, a blue chip caliber kind of a dude. And I think he's someone that we talked about that Oregon kind of likes their chances with here.
Yeah, and I'll even go so far to say this. I mean, Woodby even self-reported on social media that he was coming out to Oregon for a visit last weekend, and he just couldn't make it. And so it's not like it's bad information or these things. Just they're unofficial visits, right? I mean, I don't know if people following us travel much, but I mean, the next two flights that I've booked, the travel times have changed 2 months out from them, and so it happens in the industry anymore. And let's be real, it's the DMV out to Oregon is one heck of a trip. So to your point, great to get Woodby on campus. I know he's committed to Ohio State. The feeling there is, Oregon never gave up. I think there was only one or two other schools that really kind of kept chipping away at Woodby since his commitment, Oregon being one of them. And I think you look at this, Ohio State's doing a tremendous job recruiting in the secondary. And I think if you're Woodby, you need to keep your options open because you're looking around and looking at numbers and how many guys they're bringing in. And, you could almost get recruited over the top of, so to speak. So great for Oregon to get him out. We already talked about the spring game being a big chance to showcase. Woodby has been on campus before. Obviously, there's a relationship with Ife Obadegwu, the Oregon signee, the defensive back that we believe will probably be on campus this weekend too, which will give the two of them the chance to hang out and bond. A lot of great things here. And obviously, if Woodby's taking visits, he's clearly not 100% committed to Ohio State. I don't blame him for keeping his options open, but this is a great development for Oregon for sure.
You got to keep going after the best of the best. And if you can get those commits on campus, then I think that just bodes well for you and kind of makes your chances that much better. But we'll see what happens with Blake Woodby. Not a guy that I think we're going to talk a whole lot about today since we hit on him last week, like we talked about. But I think that was an important update. So we roll on. And so do the big visitors that are coming to Oregon, are expected in Oregon this weekend. Next guy we're going to talk about here, Justin, is Reserve Louisiana, St. Augustine defensive lineman Jakeem Stewart, who is a 5-star, the number one player in the On3 rankings for us. He's going to be coming out for the spring game. And then I saw the recent update that he's supposed to be at the Dallas Rivals camp. So could be a bit of an abbreviated trip, but hey, any visit with a guy of this caliber, I think you take what you can get. And I know that Oregon's going to prepare accordingly and do everything they can here with this guy.
Yeah, and there's one important note here, and I know he is the number one player ranked in 2026, currently a 2026 recruit, but a lot of buzz that he's looking to reclassify to 2025. And if that happens, if that's the case, this becomes a much more paramount visit for Oregon because you've obviously just accelerated the recruiting timeline a full year for him. So instead of this being a guy making a decision maybe a year out from now, a year and a half from now, it could be in 6 months or 4 months or 3 months or whatever he's feeling. So, LSU, Miami, obviously the big schools are in the mix here. Texas, Bama, everybody. I think Oregon, this is at least the second time he's been on campus for the Ducks. He was at SNL in late July last year. I don't believe he's come on campus in between. So this is a kind of I don't want to call it a make it or break it, but this is where Oregon finds out where they stand, right? You're either getting him on campus and probably locking in an official visit with him, or if you're not, you realizing that you're not that much in the game and you move on, and that's the way it goes. So I do think that this is a kind of a make it or break it visit in terms of knowing where Oregon stands moving forward.
That's a great point. This is a pivotal part in the recruiting calendar. And to your point right there, I think that just adds to the importance of this weekend, even if you don't get, a bunch of commits coming off of these visits. And then the only note that I'll add on Stewart is that with that possible reclass, Oregon already has a commitment from Tony Cumberland in the 26 class. And he told me that he's planning to reclass. At least that was the thinking after he committed. I can't remember exactly when it was, but we'll see if that ends up happening. But if he does reclass, then I think Oregon's 2025 defensive line class could take much more shape in a hurry here. And who doesn't like talking about defensive linemen? Because we got another one that we want to hit on here, Justin, that is coming out for a visit, and he's a bit of a newer name, I think, for Oregon. I haven't heard a whole lot as far as just them being linked together. But how about Elijah Griffin? He is the number one defensive lineman in the 2025 class. according to the On3 rankings out of Savannah Christian Prep. And man, you got to love getting another guy of this caliber on campus, 6'4.5", 290 pounds. Going to be fun to see what the Ducks can do here to try to shake things up.
Yeah, and as I mentioned a moment ago, if we assume that Stewart reclassifies to 2025, that puts him at the same, kind of recruiting timeline as Elijah Griffin currently. I believe this is Griffin's first visit to Oregon. He doesn't currently have an official visit lined up with Oregon. So I think this too is sort of a make it or break it point for Oregon and Griffin. Like, look, right now, this is a Hail Mary. This is a long shot. I'd say Oregon's probably no better than fifth on his list right now. Let's put this in a realistic perspective. But you're going to get this visit. You're going to hope to move up the list, and you're going to hope to stay in the game. And, Griffin's going to leave and say, I totally want to come back for an official visit, June, whatever, later in the fall. Griffin has given absolutely no indication at all that he's in a rush to make a decision. So, I mean, you got time on your side. It doesn't mean that they have to lock it in today. You got to get your foot in the door, and you've got to give yourself a chance at this thing. So I think that's what that visit's about. The same with Stewart. These are obviously elite guys that you take no matter what. You could sign 27 defensive linemen, and you're going to make room for both of these guys. That said, Oregon won't do that. I think at defensive line in particular, this will be a quality, not quantity class because of the quantity they've signed the last 2 years at the position. So you're gonna look for Oregon to be kind of big game hunting, if you will, for guys like Griffin, guys like Stewart and the others that we've talked about as well.
Just a quick side note, you talk about all the big linemen that Oregon signed these past two classes. I think that you get those guys because you have the expectation they're going to be able to contribute, but it also helps you if you miss out on some of these guys, right? It's not like they're going back to the cupboard being completely empty-handed. I know being around practice, seeing a guy like, I was going to say Jaquan McRoy, but he's O-line, Terrence Green. I saw him walking next to Kobe Savage yesterday, and I'm like, that guy could have just eaten Kobe Savage. He's just a giant human being. So there's plenty of bodies, but you got to keep pushing for the next wave and the best ones. Two more guys we want to hit on here, Justin. I know we're rolling through a bunch of these names, but two huge recruits out of the Sunshine State. The first one I think has been really interesting because it's really hard to get a read on him. DJ Pickett out of Zephyr Hills, Florida. Corner, DB, safety. I mean, I think he's probably being looked at as a corner, but this is a dude who can do it all. One of the very cream of the crop recruits in 2025, and Oregon's going to get him back on campus after hosting him for a junior day visit just a couple months ago.
Yeah, and he, seems to be a little bit of an impressionable recruit. And what I mean by that is he's taken a lot of visits. He's going through the process, and that's all great. But he kind of seems to come away from those visits kind of having a glow about that school. So right now, LSU and Miami are two of the schools being talked about the most. Also, a couple of the most recent visits for him. So I don't think, again, this is not a recruit that's looking to make a decision tomorrow, a decision in May or June. You want him on campus. You want to keep yourself in the door. I think Oregon's in that top 3, top 4 range right now. It might be better than that, but you're at least in the top 3, top 4 range. You've already got an official visit lined up in June for him, which is a great sign. This is at least the second visit he's made in the 2024 calendar year. So you're where you want to be. This is an elite dude. This guy could play receiver if he wants to, which he's talked about a little bit. He could play safety. He could play corner. And again, I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. This is very much one where you're just going to keep chopping wood, right? There's no reason to push for a commitment today. There's no reason for any of that. You just want to stay in the game and kind of play the long game here.
It's hard for me not to get excited about these Florida guys, Justin, because covering recruiting as long as I have a very good understanding about how much Oregon has tried to get into the state of Florida. Hasn't failed. They haven't failed by any means, but they just don't get that many. But they do have a success rate with some of these guys. Brandon Dorless obviously comes to mind. Charles Nelson was out of Florida. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting any other guys. David Davis was here, but he didn't do a whole heck of a lot. But all I'm saying there is that it'd be pretty fun from a coverage standpoint to see what another Florida commitment would mean for Oregon in this class.
Well, it's similar to back in the day when USC was absolutely kicking the crap out of Oregon in recruiting, and they were. There's no reason to pretend, because Oregon would get on the short list and all the way up, and then USC would offer and the kid would go to USC, right? And it would happen. And Luckily, that's no longer the case. But it happens a lot with these kids in the Southeast, and it's really hard to pull them all the way away from Georgia, Bama, Florida, FSU, Miami. The list goes on. It's hard to pull those elite kids all the way out here. Oregon has had a better success rate, like you said, with the Dorleses and maybe the guys that have just kind of gone in that next level, maybe kind of been recruited by those guys, but not really, pushed for. And so, yeah, to see them maybe get somebody like a Jakeem Stewart or a DJ Pickett or one of these elite guys would kind of be a breath of fresh air, if you will.
Absolutely, it would. It would definitely be a breath of fresh air. And hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So Oregon's going to keep trying as long as these recruits are going to listen. And they're one of those schools where you listen when they come calling. So we'll keep a close tab on DJ Pickett the best we can. Last guy we're hitting on here, Justin, Dallas Wilson, also out of the Sunshine State, 5-star wide receiver out of Tampa Bay Tech in Florida, committed to Oregon for a while now, right? We're coming up on, I think, like 15 months. He committed in January 2023. I think he was another guy that was supposed to come out last weekend, but you said that you got some confirmation he's coming this weekend. How important is it, in your opinion, for Oregon to get Dallas back on campus?
Paramount. And I think if I was circling one and said this is the most important recruit to have out for the spring game, it would be Dallas Wilson. And I say that because I don't think his recruitment ends tomorrow. Look, Miami's not giving up. Florida's not giving up. FSU's not giving up. I don't blame him. He's elite. He's an absolute ball player. I mean, he's just a stud. But I think for Oregon, most importantly with him is you want to keep him, of course. And you want to show him why he committed to Oregon in the first place. You want to bring him out for the spring game and say, this is why you wanted to be a Duck. Look at these people in the stands. Look at the energy. Look at the passion. Remind him of all that and kind of reaffirm his commitment. Now, again, you could knock it out of the park and he could leave and have all of the nicest things to say about Oregon. Those other schools aren't going to give up. But I think this really puts you in a very good spot moving forward to just kind of remind him of why he was offered and committed immediately to Oregon and why he always wanted to be a Duck. So that's why I think he's the most important one to have on campus this weekend, is because I think you could really solidify things there if you're Oregon.
I like that you said that. Basically, what I took from what you just said there is, like, obviously it's not great that all these other schools are pushing, but that's not anything new to Oregon. They have a pretty good success rate of guys committing and staying committed, or, if they end up going somewhere else, they navigate that really easily. And I don't know, this could be a whole nother podcast, but I just wanted to throw this thought out there. When I'm looking at Oregon's wide receiver board, who they have, who they're going after, obviously Dallas Wilson's huge. So is DeCorian Moore. I don't know, if I'm finding it a little bit tricky to see a world where Oregon gets Dallas and DeCorian. I feel like maybe you can tell me your thoughts here real quick before we move on, but I feel like you either hang on to Dallas or he goes somewhere else, and then you maybe slot in DeCorian. I'm not saying I think that's going to happen, but who knows? I mean, we've seen crazy things from Oregon before. Maybe they can get them both.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough. I mean, I think that's what you're trying to say in a nutshell. I mean, those are two elite guys, both 5 stars. DeCorian Moore's number 1 wide receiver in the country. And yeah, if you can somehow get Wilson and DeCorian Moore, I'm pretty sure we're going to be putting up a statue of Junior Adams out front of Autzen Stadium next year. But again, if we're looking at like the ESPN live update stats and info or whatever you want, the probability on that right now is really low. Okay. Maybe as we get to December and it's looking like Oregon's going to hang on to Wilson and is, the team to beat for more, well, obviously that probability will adjust. But yeah, right now today, it would be, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to happen, because Duck fans would all be mad at me in December when it doesn't.
Sure. Well, we spent a majority of the episode talking about some recruiting and what else do you expect from Justin and myself, but there's other stuff going on in the great world of football and Duck football. The 2024 NFL draft is set to take place and begin tomorrow, right? The first round. I think Oregon can make some noise, right? You're looking at Bo Nix, Jackson Powers Johnson, and Troy Franklin as the biggest names that you have circled, but someone like an Evan Williams and Jamal Hill, I think they've done a good job this offseason to raise their stock where possible. What do you think about just some draft thoughts, Justin, as we get ready for the big day?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Duck fans and a lot of the NFL buzz has been around Bo Nix, right? And it's a loaded quarterback class. Caleb Williams, Drake May, McCarthy, Penix, Bo, all those guys. Where are they going to fall? I mean, we've seen so much about the Broncos looking at Bo Nix because of fit, because of where they could draft him and all that. It makes a ton of sense. So, whether he's drafted at 12 to the Broncos or maybe the Broncos, trade, move down a little bit and get some draft capital along with it. That seems to be the team, to beat, not to beat, but that seems to be the team linked to Bo Nix the most. The one to me, and we could talk about this more, but Troy Franklin really seems to be finding himself as more of a Friday guy, and Friday's rounds 2 and round 3. I don't think that we'll see Troy Franklin taken in the first round. Definitely a ton of talent. I think somebody's going to get a dude, but it just looks like the NFL GM. Again, it's a loaded wide receiver class too, so no fault of his own. Jackson Powers Johnson becomes the next one that you're really intrigued about, because I've seen him as early as the middle of the first round, and I've seen him being in the early to the middle of the second round. So that seems to be where he's going. So you just kind of have to wonder if he's going to have his name called Thursday night or if it's going to be probably on Friday. I did see something for ESPN put out, and I think it said that basically center was the most safest position to draft in the NFL as far as the hit rate. So maybe that'll bode well for JPJ. I don't know.
Yeah, some of my thoughts here on the draft. I know that the Zach Wilson trade to Denver might shake things up a bit, but at the same time, I mean, he hasn't been a dude that's been proven to be a bona fide starter, no doubt, hold on that position. So Knicks to Denver could be a good fit. I kind of get really excited about watching maybe Penix in Vegas. Even though he was dicing up Oregon during his time in the Pac-12, I just like watching that guy play, and I want to see the Raiders do well under Antonio Pierce. And then Jackson Powers Johnson, I think he's a really important guy here because Oregon's really identified themselves. They've rooted their identity, I feel like, in the trenches, whether that's the D line or the O line. And if you can have Penei Sewell and JPJ as two of your more recent guys that are just wrecking havoc in the league, I think that bodes really well for you. And as much as I want to see Troy Franklin get drafted high, maybe if he falls a little bit, he ends up in a better situation. So I think that that's something for fans to keep an eye on, because a lot of these guys that get drafted high, they're going to some rough situations. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise if he ends up falling. But his body of work speaks for himself, and he's the best guy to come through Oregon, really, I think, at the position.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of drafts putting Troy Franklin on the Chiefs, and that makes a ton of sense. That would be a great situation for him. He'd be a great compliment to Mahomes. Obviously, they need a little bit of a better receiving core there, and that might be a steal for them. I think JPJ, because of the position he plays center, I think he has the opportunity to find himself being like a final piece for a team that's poised to kind of push for a playoff or a championship run. So, I've seen him linked to the Dolphins. You look at the firepower the Dolphins have on offense, a guy like JPJ in the middle that, helps them maintain that offensive line could be the missing piece, if you will. I don't care about the Dolphins. I'm just saying it makes sense for some of those teams that are, maybe just a step down for being in the upper tier, to invest in that position and probably become, a better offensive unit for sure, and protect their, key investment at quarterback, whoever they have.
Want to talk a little spring game before we get out of here?
Yeah, spring game. Rainy
right.
spring game. Spring game this year, it looks like.
I hope not. I mean, I love the rain, Justin, but when I was looking at the forecast, I'm like, you can rain any day that isn't Tuesday or Thursday with practice, and then Saturday with the spring game, but we can't control the weather. I know you had a discussion on the Scoop Duck message boards about what you're most excited to see in the spring game. So maybe we can just, throw that question out there for the folks that are watching and listening to us, and then call it a day.
Yeah, my immediate answer on that, and I plan on going more in depth on that this week, but my immediate answer to that was quarterback, and not because I do believe there's a battle at the quarterback position. I don't. I think that this is Dylan Gabriel's team, but I really want to see that room, and I want to see Dylan Gabriel's command of the offense. Totally understand it's going to be vanilla. Totally understand they're going to run the same 2 or 3 plays. We're not going to see anything, but I just want to see him comfortable. I want to see him executing, moving the ball. Basically, what we took for granted with Bo Nix, right? Bo Nix was so damn efficient that you almost forget that mistakes could be made because Bo Nix made so few. I'm not expecting that from Dylan Gresham, but I'd like to see something close to that because it was pretty amazing to watch. And then Dante Moore, I really want to see where he's at. What is he farther along in his development than maybe some of us expect? Is he not quite where he should be? Maybe as some of us believe in his development. I don't know the answer, so it'll just be nice to see, where he's at and what he's grown from leaving UCLA and the time that he's had at Oregon and what things he can work on. Because I think we all agree that there is a tremendous quarterback there in Dante Moore. He's just got to work some things out, and that's okay. He'll do that. I just like to see how far along he is in that, because I've actually heard he's been really, really good and pushing Dylan Gabriel quite a bit. But who knows if that's coach talk or what that is. And so, and again, I don't want to leave them out, but I do want to see Austin Novosad's development, Luke Moga's development. I'm not expecting Luke Moga to take over the world, but it'd be nice to see, him in action a little bit and just kind of see where he's at in this stage of his career too.
Definitely echo everything you say there about the quarterbacks. I mean, it's the most important position on the team, and Oregon finds themselves ushering in a new era post Bo Nix. But I'm going to go DBs. I'm going to go DBs because I feel like there's so many interesting players there. Oregon's recruited the position pretty well. I think there's a little bit of work to be done at safety, but I'm really confident in the direction that they're headed there in the big picture. We got to talk to Jabbar Muhammad yesterday. Awesome kid. Just like immediately going to be a fan favorite, I think, here in Eugene. But I'm super excited to see what he can do. The Ducks need some lockdown corners. Dan Lanning did say yesterday, kind of flew under the radar, that he doesn't expect your Low Florence to be able to suit up for the remainder of spring. Not a huge shock there, just given that we haven't seen him at all this spring. I know he was walking around the facility yesterday after practice, but him, Kim Alexander, Kobe Savage, there's so many new names at defensive back that you want to see. Brandon Johnson isn't here yet, but I think that Oregon is hopefully going to have some more answers and a better feel for where some of these DBs are at. And my God, they have some receivers to push them.
Yeah, I think I love your point, because that would probably be the second thing I would mention is the DBs. And I think it's because the last 2 years, ultimately, that's been the weakest spot on the roster, if you will, is DB. I think 2 years ago, it was really not very good. Last year, it was definitely better. I think this year it has a chance to be even better because of not only the starting guys that you'll have back there, the starting five, but the fact that you have depth behind them. You have the ability for guys to move around a little bit. I think Kobe Savage is a tremendous addition. And I think Jabbar Muhammad has a chance to be the best corner in the country, for not just in the conference, not just in whatever. I think he has a chance to be the best corner in the country. And definitely that makes that room much better as well. Not that they gave up a lot with Kyrie Jackson last year or Christian Gonzalez the year before that, but Jabbar Muhammad has a chance to be special. That's going to be a fun group to watch too.
I can't wait. Spring game is set for 1:00 p.m. Pacific on Saturday, and then make sure you stay tuned after for the Matt, is it Kearney? That's how you say it, right?
Matt Kearney concert. Yep.
Matt Kearney concert. So that'll be a fun day. Hopefully going to get to see a ton of Duck fans. If you see me around, definitely just say what's up. And yeah, it's been a fun episode, Justin. We got to 30 minutes in the blink of an eye. But any final remarks here before you hit the road here?
No, I know that we both wish we could, do this podcast for longer today, but time's not allowing. But I'm glad we were able to get one out. And again, just loving the feedback from everybody on the site with the addition of Max and obviously the contributions of Chad Simmons and Steve Wiltfong. I'll say this briefly. You got a chance right now, if you're not signed up for Scoop Duck, to read it all for 1 month for $1. And I would take advantage of that because the stuff that is being put out on the site is absolutely top notch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And it's been a blast getting to connect with everybody on the message boards and just kind of get re-ingratiated into the community. Big word there, but I think I used it right. Every now and then I do that. I like to think I can write a little bit. But yeah, no, it's been a great episode, Justin. If you guys want to find more of me, you can lock in with me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck on 3 YouTube channel and give us a try over there at scoopduck.com. And then last but not least, share the show, share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Thank you for talking some Duck football with us. And thanks to Justin for stopping by. We'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.